What would you do if you discovered that the prime suspect in a murder investigation is the man you're falling in love with? In Raven's Cove, a seemingly idyllic coastal town, Detective Olivia Matthews faces exactly this dilemma. While investigating the mysterious death of a young artist whose paintings appear to hide coded messages, she finds herself inexplicably drawn to Daniel Vaughn, a reclusive writer with a shadowy past. But in a town where even the walls have eyes and the waves keep secrets, nothing is what it seems. And when old paintings begin to reveal a deadly conspiracy, Olivia must decide who to trust, her heart or her suspicions. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next stories.
The morning fog still lingered over Raven's Cove when Olivia Matthews pushed open the door to Samantha Carter's studio. The creaking of hinges echoed through the empty space, mixing with the distant sound of seagulls. The scent of oil paint still permeated the air, as if the artist had just left the place and not departed forever. 3 days ago, Olivia adjusted her navy blue blazer, a nervous habit that had accompanied her since her first days as a detective. Her footsteps echoed on the wooden floor as she observed the various canvases scattered throughout the space. Samantha Carter's paintings had something hypnotic about them, seascapes that seemed to hide secrets in every wave, portraits with gazes that followed observers. That's when she saw it. Near the window overlooking the sea, partially covered by fabric, was an easel with an unfinished canvas. Olivia approached, gently removing the cloth. Her heart instantly quickened. The painting showed Raven's Cove's old pier at dusk. At first glance, it seemed like a common scene from the coastal town. The calm sea, seagulls in the sky, some boats anchored. But there was something more. In the reflection of one of the abandoned warehouse windows, Samantha had painted a figure observing the scene. A figure that shouldn't have been there. Impressive, isn't it? The unexpected deep voice made Olivia turn quickly. Standing in the studio doorway was Daniel Vaughn, the reclusive writer who lived in the house on the hill. Tall, with dark hair slightly graying at the temples and penetrating green eyes, he had the kind of presence that filled the room. Samantha had a gift for capturing what people didn't want seen. Mr. Vaughn. Olivia maintained a professional tone, ignoring the slight tremor she felt upon meeting that gaze. I wasn't expecting to find you here. I imagine not. He approached, his steps deliberately slow. But considering I'm the primary suspect in her murder, I figured it was only a matter of time until we met. His frankness caught her off guard. Olivia studied his face, looking for signs of guilt or nervousness, but found only deep sadness in those green eyes. How did you know I would be here? I didn't. Daniel stopped beside her, looking at the painting. I've been coming here every morning since it happened, trying to understand. Understand what? Why someone would want to silence such a brilliant soul. He lightly touched the edge of the canvas. Samantha didn't just paint what she saw, Detective Matthews. She painted what she feared. Olivia turned her attention back to the painting, now noticing other disturbing details. The shadows on the pier formed patterns that resembled letters. The reflection in the water showed not the current sky, but a night sky. And the figure in the window. The more she looked, the more familiar that profile seemed. You appear in many of her paintings, Mr. Vaughn. Daniel, please. He gave a sad smile. And yes, I do. We were friends. Or at least, he paused. His eyes meeting hers, that's what I thought until I found this. Daniel removed an envelope from his coat pocket and handed it to Olivia. Inside was a handwritten note. If anything happens to me, don't trust the man in the house on the hill. He's not who he claims to be. The sound of seagulls outside seemed louder now, almost deafening in the silence that followed. Olivia looked again at the painting, at the envelope in her hands, and then at Daniel. There was something in his eyes, fear, guilt, or just pain, that both intrigued and alarmed her. Why are you showing me this? Because he took a deep breath. I want you to find the truth, Detective Matthews. Even if it incriminates me. In that moment, as the morning sun finally broke through the mist and illuminated the studio, Olivia realized she was facing something much bigger than a simple murder. On the walls around her, dozens of painted eyes seemed to be watching, as if Samantha Carter's works themselves were witnessing this moment. And somewhere behind those brushstrokes lay hidden a truth that someone would kill to keep secret. Evening was falling over Raven's Cove when Olivia entered the Lighthouse Cafe, the favorite meeting spot of local residents. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and apple pie filled the cozy space, decorated with vintage photographs of the town. Through the large windows, one could see the choppy sea and dark clouds approaching. "The same place where she used to sit," said Jennifer Pratt, serving Olivia a cup of tea. The cafe owner, a woman in her early 40s with a gentle smile and watchful eyes, had been Samantha's best friend. Every morning, precisely at 9, Sam would sit here with her sketchbook. Olivia observed the table by the window. From there, one had a perfect view of the old pier, the same pier from the unfinished painting in the studio. Her thoughts inevitably returned to her meeting with Daniel that morning. There was something about him that intrigued her beyond the investigation. The way his green eyes seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories, how his deep voice carried a melancholy that touched her in a way it shouldn't. "Jennifer, how long did you know Samantha?" "Since she moved here 5 years ago." Jennifer sat across from Olivia, her restless hands fidgeting with a napkin. "It was like finding a sister I never knew I had." Sam, he saw the world differently. Through her paintings she could reveal people's true nature. And Daniel Vaughn? How did she meet him? Jennifer's face hardened slightly. Daniel started coming to the cafe after his wife passed away 2 years ago. Sam was the only one who could get him to talk. They would spend hours discussing art and literature. Olivia felt an unexpected pang of jealousy. No, it couldn't be. He was a professional after all. But the image of Daniel and Samantha in long intimate conversations bothered her in a way that made no sense. "At first I thought it was good for both of them," Jennifer continued. "But then, Sam started to change. Became more reserved. Worried. Her paintings changed too. They weren't just landscapes and portraits anymore. There was something disturbing about them." Jennifer lowered her voice. "A week before she died she showed me something. A series of sketches she'd made of the old harbor. There were figures in the shadows, secret meetings, briefcases being exchanged." A distant thunder rumbled, making the teacups tremble slightly. The storm was approaching. The cafe's bell chimed, and Olivia felt her pulse quicken before she even turned. She already knew who it was. There was something in the atmosphere that changed when Daniel Vaughn entered a room. He appeared shaking off the drizzle that had started to fall, his slightly damp hair highlighting the silver at his temples in a way that made him even more attractive. His eyes found hers immediately, and Olivia felt that now familiar warmth in her chest, mixed with a professional unease that warned her to keep her distance. He wore a dark blue sweater that emphasized his eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to touch him, to feel the warmth of his hands. "Good afternoon, ladies," he greeted with his deep voice, heading to the counter. The slight accent she couldn't quite place seemed more pronounced today, adding another mystery to his already enigmatic figure. Jennifer rose quickly. "I need to attend to some customers." Before leaving, she leaned in and whispered to Olivia, "Be careful. In Raven's Cove even the walls have eyes." There was something in her tone that suggested she had noticed Olivia's reaction to Daniel's arrival. Olivia watched as Jennifer served coffee to Daniel. There was tension in the air, almost palpable, but now it was different. It wasn't just the tension of the investigation, but something more personal, more dangerous. She caught herself studying his profile, the way he held his cup, how his long writer's fingers drummed softly on the counter. Through the window she could see the old pier, now partially hidden by the rain that had started to fall. Somewhere between those old boards and abandoned warehouses lay hidden the truth about Samantha's death. And now Olivia faced two mysteries. What had happened to the young artist, and why, despite all warnings, her heart insisted on racing every time Daniel Vaughn was near. Fighting the urge to approach him, Olivia opened her notebook, forcing herself to focus on the case. But even as she wrote, she could feel the weight of his gaze upon her, like an invisible caress that left her restless and at the same time strangely comforted. The rain was now falling harder, creating a silver curtain that isolated the cafe from the rest of the world. And perhaps, Olivia thought while watching Daniel's reflection in the window, The real danger wasn't what he might be hiding, but what she was beginning to feel for him. The rain had turned into a storm when Olivia returned to Samantha's studio. The premature darkness of the afternoon made the place even more mysterious, with shadows dancing on the walls while occasional lightning illuminated the paintings like flashes from a phantom camera. She shouldn't have been there alone, but something in Jennifer's words troubled her. While searching through the studio drawers with her latex gloves, Olivia tried to ignore the sensation that the eyes in the paintings were following her. A particularly loud thunder made her start, and she almost dropped the small wooden box she had just found at the bottom of a drawer. The box had delicate carvings of birds in flight. Inside was a dark green notebook worn from use with the initials SC embossed in gold. Samantha's diary. Olivia sat on the small sofa by the window, turning on the antique lamp that created a cozy circle of golden light. The first pages were full of sketches and observations about the town and its inhabitants. But as she advanced in her reading, the tone changed. March 15th. Something's wrong at the harbor. Last night, I saw Sheriff Ryan meeting a man in a dark suit near Warehouse 7. They exchanged a briefcase. Need to investigate more. March 23rd. Daniel has been acting strange. Today I saw him talking to Ryan at the cafe. There was something in their body language. Tension? Fear? I can't decipher it. But Daniel's eyes. I've never seen him so troubled. A sudden noise made Olivia look up. Her heart raced when she saw Daniel standing in the doorway, rainwater dripping from his dark coat. Sorry, he said, his deep voice echoing in the space. I saw the light on. Wasn't expecting to find anyone here. Olivia closed the diary discreetly but not quickly enough. Daniel's eyes fixed on the object. So, you found it, he said, approaching. The lamp light created interesting shadows on his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw. Samantha always carried that diary. Why are you really here, Daniel? He ran his hand through his wet hair, a gesture that Olivia was beginning to recognize as a sign of nervousness. For the same reason as you, I imagine. Looking for answers. He sat in the armchair opposite her, close enough for Olivia to catch the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with the smell of rain. What did she write about me? Why do you think she wrote something about you? A sad smile crossed his lips. Because Samantha wrote about everything. It was her way of trying to understand the world. He looked out the window where the storm continued in full force. She had a gift for seeing through people. Sometimes things they didn't even want to see themselves. Olivia studied his profile for a moment. His proximity made her uneasy, but not from fear. It was something different, an energy that made her heart beat faster. She wrote about a meeting between you and Sheriff Ryan. Daniel turned his gaze to her, and Olivia felt as if the air between them had become electrically charged. Yes. There was a meeting. His voice was lower now, almost a whisper. Ryan sought me out. He wanted information about the book I'm writing. What book? A novel about corruption in small coastal towns. Daniel leaned forward, his green eyes intense in the lamplight. Based on real events. Lightning illuminated the studio, followed immediately by deafening thunder. The lights flickered and went out, leaving them in the dimness, illuminated only by occasional flashes from the storm. Olivia felt more than saw Daniel move. Suddenly he was beside her on the sofa, too close. The warmth of his body was a tangible presence in the dark. Olivia. His voice was even lower, more intimate. There are things happening in this town that are bigger and more dangerous than you imagine. Samantha discovered that in the worst possible way. Why don't you tell me everything you know? Olivia hated how shaky her own voice sounded. Because. He hesitated and she could feel his soft breath. Because the more you know, the more danger you're in. And I can't. His hand found hers in the dark. I don't want anything to happen to you. His touch sent an electric current through her entire body. It was wrong, it was dangerous. It was against everything she stood for as a detective. But in that moment, in the darkness of the studio with the storm raging outside, Olivia couldn't bring herself to care. Samantha's diary was still in her lap, its pages holding secrets that could reveal the truth. But now there was another mystery intriguing her. How could she trust her professional instincts when her heart seemed determined to lead her in the opposite direction? The power never came back that night. Olivia and Daniel remained in the studio, trapped by the storm, illuminated only by an old flashlight she had found in a drawer. The circle of yellowish light created an intimate bubble around them, as if the rest of the world had disappeared into darkness. "I think I found something," Olivia said, carefully turning the pages of the diary. Her fingers still tingled where Daniel had touched them moments before. Samantha made a series of notes about movements at the harbor. Dates, times, names of vessels. Daniel leaned in to see better, his shoulder lightly brushing against hers. The contact, though subtle, sent shivers down her spine. "Midnight Rose," he read in a low voice. "That name appears several times. You know it? It's a yacht. Usually docks here every 2 weeks. He hesitated. "Belongs to Maxwell Crawford, a businessman from Boston." Olivia frowned, flipping through a few more pages. Samantha drew him. "Look." The sketch showed a middle-aged man, elegantly dressed, talking to Sheriff Ryan near Warehouse 7. There was something unsettling about the way Samantha had shaded the sheriff's eyes, giving him an almost predatory expression. "Crawford is building a luxury resort on the other side of the bay," Daniel continued. "But there are rumors." A noise from downstairs interrupted them. Footsteps. Someone was climbing the studio stairs. In a quick movement, Daniel turned off the flashlight and pulled Olivia behind a large canvas leaning against the wall. The space was tight, forcing them to stay very close. Olivia could feel his heart beating strongly against her back, his warm breath on her neck. The studio door opened with a creak. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, moving methodically through the room. Olivia held her breath as the light passed near their hiding place. "Nothing here," a familiar male voice said quietly. "Sheriff Ryan. But someone was here recently. It's still warm." "Keep looking," another voice replied, deeper with a slight Boston accent. "That diary has to be somewhere." Olivia felt Daniel's arms tighten protectively around her as the footsteps approached where they were hiding. She knew she should be focused on the danger, but she couldn't ignore the warmth of his body, the way his hands held firmly at her waist. The minutes dragged like hours until finally the footsteps retreated. The door closed and silence returned to reign in the studio. "I think they're gone," Daniel whispered, his lips dangerously close to her ear. Olivia turned to face him in the dark, still within the circle of his arms. Lightning briefly illuminated his face, the intense green eyes, the worried expression, the slightly parted lips. "Why is Sheriff Ryan looking for the diary?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "For the same reason they killed Samantha," he replied, one of his hands rising to gently touch her face. "She discovered something about the resort. Something big enough to kill for. And you? What's your role in all this?" The question hung between them, heavy as the storm raging outside. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment as if fighting an internal battle. "I was investigating Crawford for my book," he finally said. "Samantha found out and started helping me. She had access to places people could observe without being noticed. But then she found something. Something that scared her so much she stopped trusting even me." His hand still caressed her face, a touch as soft as a breeze. "The last time I saw her, she said she had enough evidence to destroy them all." The next day, Olivia felt tears forming in her eyes. Her professional instinct screamed that she should step away, that Daniel was still a suspect, that this whole story could be an elaborate lie. But her heart. Another lightning illuminated the studio, and for a moment she saw complete vulnerability in his eyes. Without thinking, she moved closer, her hands finding their way to his chest. "Olivia," he murmured her name like a prayer. "I should have protected her. I can't make the same mistake twice. If something happened to you..." She never knew who moved first. One moment they were staring at each other in the darkness, the next their lips met in a desperate, urgent kiss, as if the world was ending outside with the storm. When they finally separated, breathless, Olivia knew she had crossed a line from which there was no return. The case, her career, her life, everything had just become infinitely more complicated. But with Samantha's diary in one hand and the other intertwined with Daniel's, she also knew there was no other path to follow. The storm continued outside, but a different storm had just begun in her heart. Morning arrived in Raven's Cove, bringing a surprisingly clear sky after the storm. Olivia watched the sunrise from her window at the Coral Inn, the small hotel where she was staying, while rereading Samantha's diary pages for the 10th time. She hadn't been able to sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt Daniel's lips on hers again, the warmth of his arms, the feeling of safety that had enveloped her even in the midst of danger. It was madness, she knew. How could she trust a man who was still technically a suspect? Her phone vibrated, a message from Jennifer. "We need to talk. It's about Sam's last painting. Breakfast at the lighthouse?" Half an hour later, Olivia entered the cafe. The aroma of fresh bread and coffee mingled with the lingering smell of rain in the air. Jennifer was waiting at the same window table, her face marked by deep circles under her eyes. "You won't believe what I found," Jennifer said as soon as Olivia sat down. She slid a brown envelope across the table. It was hidden behind one of Sam's last canvases in the cafe's storage room. Inside the envelope were photographs. Olivia felt her heart race as she recognized the scene, the old pier late at night. Sheriff Ryan appeared in several of them, always near a luxury yacht that could only be the Midnight Rose. "There's more," Jennifer continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Sam told me something the night before. Before it happened. She had discovered that the resort wasn't just a resort. Crawford was using the construction as a front for something bigger." "What kind of front?" "Money laundering. Millions of dollars in suspicious transactions passing through Raven's Cove." Jennifer looked nervously out the window. Ryan was in on the scheme from the beginning. He made sure no one asked questions about the boats arriving at night. "And Daniel?" Olivia tried to keep her voice neutral when pronouncing his name. "Sam trusted him, at first." Jennifer hesitated. But in the last few weeks she was different. Scared. Said she had discovered something about his past, something that changed everything. Olivia felt a tightness in her chest. Before she could ask more questions, the doorbell chimed. Daniel walked in and their eyes met immediately. He looked as tired as she felt, but there was something else in his eyes. Worry? Guilt? Jennifer stood up abruptly. "I need to attend to some customers." Before leaving, she leaned in and whispered, "Samantha left something else. In the place where everything began." Daniel approached the table but maintained a respectful distance. The tension between them was almost palpable. "Olivia," he began, his voice hoarse. "About last night." "No." She interrupted him, putting the photos back in the envelope. "Not here. Not now." He nodded, understanding. "I found more information about Crawford. Things that explain why Samantha was so frightened." "Meet me at the studio in an hour," Olivia said, standing up. As she passed him, she caught his familiar scent, wood and sea, and her heart skipped a beat. "And Daniel, come prepared to tell me the whole truth. About everything." Walking down Raven's Cove's main street, Olivia tried to organize her thoughts. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together, but something was still missing. Something important. "The place where everything began," she muttered to herself, suddenly stopping. And then she realized. The first painting Samantha had done when she arrived in Raven's Cove, the one still hanging in the town hall. The painting that showed the harbor years ago, before the resort, before Crawford. Before everything went wrong. Olivia changed direction, her heart beating faster. Jennifer was right. If there was something else hidden, she just hoped she would get there before it was too late. Raven's Cove's town hall was an imposing Victorian building, with tall windows and a marble staircase that had seen better days. On that quiet morning, the only sounds were those of seagulls and the distant sea. Olivia climbed the worn steps with a racing heart. The lobby was empty. Monday was city council meeting day in the annex building. Perfect. She would have time to examine the painting without interruptions. Samantha's work dominated the main wall. A panoramic view of Raven's Cove Harbor at sunset, painted in warm tones of gold and amber. It was impressive how the artist had captured the essence of the place. The melancholic beauty, the mystery of elongated shadows, the promise of secrets hidden in every dock. Olivia moved closer, studying every detail. At first glance, it was just a beautiful landscape, but knowing Samantha as she did now, looking for something specific, detective? Sheriff Ryan's voice caught her by surprise. He was standing in the lobby entrance, his badge gleaming in the morning light streaming through the windows. Just admiring the local art, she replied, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. Samantha Carter had a special gift. She did indeed. Ryan approached, stopping beside her. A real loss to our community, especially considering the circumstances. There was something in his tone that made Olivia shiver internally. What circumstances would those be, Sheriff? Ryan smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. You should know better than I do, considering how much time you spent in her studio last night. With Daniel Vaughn. Olivia's blood ran cold. Before she could respond, her phone vibrated, a message from Daniel. Don't go to the studio. Meet me at the old pier in 15 minutes. It's about Crawford. If you'll excuse me, Sheriff, she said, putting away her phone. I have an investigation to conduct. Of course. Ryan stepped aside, but his next words made her pause. Just a piece of advice, detective. Some paintings are like mirrors, they show more than they meant to. Samantha learned that the hard way. Olivia kept her steps steady until she left town hall, but her heart was beating uncontrollably. Something in the painting had caught Ryan's attention. Something important enough for him to watch her. The old pier was a 10-minute walk away. The day was clear, but a persistent mist hung over the water, creating a natural curtain that concealed the more distant warehouses. Daniel was already there, leaning against one of the ancient pillars. The sea breeze played with his hair, and for a moment, just a moment, Olivia allowed her heart to overrule her professional mind. What did you find? She asked, stopping a few steps from him. Not here. He looked around nervously. Follow me. He guided her through a maze of containers and abandoned equipment to a small office at the end of the pier. The place seemed unused for years but was surprisingly organized. My secret workspace, Daniel explained, closing the door. Where I write about things nobody wants written. He moved to a desk covered with papers and photographs. Crawford isn't just building a resort. He's creating a smuggling route. The resort is perfect. Rich guests coming and going, luxury boats, constant movement of money. Who would question it? And Ryan? He ensures local police stay out of the way. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Olivia now recognized as a sign of agitation. But there's something bigger. Something Samantha discovered the week before. A noise from outside interrupted them. Footsteps on the wooden deck. Daniel reacted instantly, pulling Olivia behind a filing cabinet. The space was even smaller than in the studio, and this time there was no avoiding full body contact. Olivia, he whispered, his warm breath on her cheek. There's something I need to tell you. About my past. About who I really am. The footsteps were getting closer. Olivia could feel Daniel's heart beating against her chest, fast and strong like her own. Their faces were so close that it would take only the slightest movement to. The doorknob started to turn. Daniel, are you there? Jennifer's voice echoed through the small office, followed by the creak of the opening door. Olivia felt Daniel relax slightly against her, but neither of them moved immediately. The moment of danger had passed, but the intimacy of the situation remained, electrifying and dangerous in an entirely different way. Here. Daniel finally answered, his voice hoarse. He reluctantly moved away from Olivia, and the cold air that filled the space between them felt almost painful. Jennifer appeared beside the filing cabinet, her face pale with worry. Thank God I found you both. Ryan was at town hall asking questions about the painting. He knows. Knows what? Olivia asked, trying to ignore the warmth she still felt from her contact with Daniel. About the coordinates, Jennifer answered, moving to the paper-covered desk. Samantha didn't just paint landscapes. She encoded information in her works. Numbers hidden in the waves, patterns in the clouds. The town hall painting? It's a map. Daniel cursed softly. That's why she insisted it be hung there. It was her final message. Olivia observed them both, a new suspicion growing in her mind. You knew. All this time you knew more than you were telling. Not everything. Daniel moved closer to her, his green eyes pleading for understanding. I met Samantha when I was investigating Crawford for my book. She discovered what I was doing and wanted to help. We started working together, documenting the night meetings, the suspicious transactions. But then she discovered something bigger. Something about Crawford's past, and mine. He hesitated, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. Olivia, I'm not just a writer. I'm an undercover federal agent. The silence that followed his confession was deafening. Olivia felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. That's why she stopped trusting you, she murmured. She discovered your true identity. Yes. But not in the way you think. Daniel took a step toward her. Samantha discovered that Crawford had an informant inside the FBI. Someone was leaking information warning about investigations. She thought it was me. And wasn't it? Olivia's voice trembled slightly. No. But when I tried to explain, to show my real credentials, it was too late. He swallowed hard. She had already sent the evidence to someone she trusted completely. Jennifer interrupted, her voice urgent. The coordinates in the painting? They lead to a location in the old harbor. Samantha hid something there, something big enough to bring down Crawford and everyone involved. Including the FBI informant, Daniel completed, his eyes never leaving Olivia's. The distant sound of a boat cut through the air, followed by voices approaching the pier. Jennifer ran to the window. It's the midnight rose, she whispered. Crawford is here. Olivia looked at Daniel, her heart torn between the betrayal of the lie and understanding of duty. He took another step toward her, reducing the distance between them until she could feel the warmth of his body again. I never lied about how I feel, he murmured, his voice so low that only she could hear. Us. It's the only true thing I've felt in years. Before she could respond, the voices grew closer. They had minutes, perhaps seconds. The coordinates, Olivia said, forcing herself to focus. Where exactly do they lead? Jennifer pointed to a spot on the map spread across the desk. Warehouse 13. But something's wrong. That warehouse doesn't exist anymore. It was demolished years ago. No, Daniel said, a gleam of understanding in his eyes. It wasn't demolished. It was hidden. And I think I know why. A sound of heavy footsteps on the deck interrupted the conversation. This time it wasn't Jennifer on the other side of the door. And there was nowhere to hide. The heavy footsteps on the deck drew closer. Daniel quickly turned off the office light, plunging the room into darkness. The only illumination now came from the foggy window, where the morning mist still lingered over the harbor. There's a way out through the back, he whispered, guiding Olivia and Jennifer behind a bookshelf. It leads straight to the lower deck. The sound of male voices came through the door. You sure you saw movement here, boss? Of course I did. Search everything. Olivia recognized the second voice, one of Crawford's security guards she had seen in Samantha's photos. Her heart was pounding, but years of training kept her focused. As the men approached the door, Daniel silently moved a loose panel in the back wall, revealing a narrow passage. It was tight, but they could make it through. Jennifer went first, followed by Olivia. Daniel entered last, replacing the panel just as the office door opened. The passage descended through the old pier structure, the smell of damp wood and salt permeating the air. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged on a lower deck, partially hidden by abandoned containers. This way, Jennifer pointed to a series of warehouses half hidden by the fog. Number 13 used to be in that direction. How do you know that? Olivia asked, studying the woman's face. Because I helped Samantha, Jennifer replied, her voice trembling slightly. She needed someone to document the nighttime movements at the harbor while she painted. I took the photos. A noise above them interrupted the conversation. Crawford's men had discovered the passage. The coordinates in the painting, Daniel said quickly, guiding them between containers. They don't lead to the current warehouse 13. They lead to the original one, the one that existed before the harbor renovation. And where exactly is that? Olivia asked, trying to keep her breath as they moved quickly through the port area. Underneath Crawford's new resort, Jennifer answered. Samantha found the original harbor plans in the municipal library. Warehouse 13 wasn't demolished. It was incorporated into the resort's foundation. And there's something down there, something Crawford doesn't want anyone to find. Voices and footsteps now echoed through the harbor, coming from various directions. They were being surrounded. Olivia, Daniel gently held her arm, his green eyes intense even in the dimness. There's something you need to know. I really am a federal agent, but I'm not here officially. This investigation, it's personal. Why? Because Crawford didn't start this in Raven's Cove. He did the same thing in other coastal towns, including Hampton Bay, where my wife was an investigative journalist. The meaning of those words hit Olivia like a punch. Daniel's wife hadn't died in an accident. She had been silenced, just like Samantha. A siren cut through the air, followed by police car lights near the harbor entrance. Sheriff Ryan had arrived. They were running out of time. The passage to the old warehouse, Jennifer said urgently. Samantha showed me the entrance. It's over there through the old drainage system. Olivia looked at Daniel, seeing in his eyes the same conflict she felt, professional duty against something much more personal and profound that had grown between them. Let's go, she decided, holding his hand. It's time to finish what Samantha started. The sirens grew louder and the fog began to dissipate. Somewhere ahead of them, hidden under years of secrets and lies, was the truth that had cost Samantha Carter her life. And they had just one chance to uncover it. The drainage system was a labyrinth of narrow, damp tunnels. Jennifer guided them with surprising confidence, using the dim light of her cell phone to illuminate the way. Every few meters, they could hear the distant echo of sirens and voices above them. Samantha mapped all these tunnels, Jennifer explained, her low voice reverberating off the concrete walls. She spent weeks studying the old system, comparing it with the harbor's original plans. Olivia noticed Daniel becoming increasingly tense as they advanced. Her years of experience as a detective told her there was more to his story than just vengeance for his wife's death. How much further? She asked when they stopped at a fork. Not far. The access to the old warehouse 13's basement should be just past that bend. Jennifer pointed to the left. Samantha said. A metallic noise above interrupted them, followed by the distinct sound of a manhole cover being opened. They know, Daniel murmured, instinctively pulling Olivia closer. They know the tunnels too. This way, Jennifer guided them through an even narrower side corridor. There's a secondary passage that Samantha discovered. It was used during Prohibition for smuggling. As they moved quickly through the tunnel, Olivia noticed something on the walls, old marks, symbols half erased by time. They're markers, Daniel explained, noticing her interest. The smugglers used them to navigate down here. My wife found similar marks in Hampton Bay. His voice faltered slightly at mentioning his wife, and Olivia felt a tightness in her chest. There was so much pain there, so much untold history. What exactly did your wife discover in Hampton Bay? She asked softly. Daniel remained silent for a moment, only the sound of their footsteps echoing in the tunnel. She discovered that Crawford wasn't alone. There's a larger organization, powerful people using these coastal towns as distribution points. Ella. She was about to expose everything when a sudden noise ahead made them stop. Jennifer raised her hand in warning, turning off her phone light. In the total darkness, Olivia felt Daniel's hand find hers, squeezing it gently. Seconds dragged like hours until Jennifer whispered, I think it was just water. We're close now. The entrance to the basement should be right there. When the light returned, they found themselves facing an old metal door, partially hidden by years of sediment. On its rusty hinges, Olivia noticed the same type of marking she had seen on the walls. How are we going to open it? She asked, examining the old lock. We don't need to, Jennifer answered, moving to the side of the door. Her fingers found an almost invisible panel in the wall. Samantha discovered there's a secondary entrance. The smugglers always had an escape route. The panel slid silently, revealing a narrow passage. The air coming from inside was surprisingly fresh, carrying a slight scent of the sea. Ella would have loved to see this, Daniel murmured almost to himself. All these secrets, these hidden stories. Olivia squeezed his hand, offering silent comfort. In that moment she completely understood. It wasn't just about solving a crime. It was about justice, about finishing something that had started years ago in another coastal town. "Let's go," she said softly. "Let's find out what Samantha wanted us to discover." As they entered the dark passage, Olivia realized they were about to uncover not just the mystery of one death, but a web of secrets that stretched back decades. And somewhere in that darkness lay the truth that two women had died to protect. A truth that might cost their own lives to reveal. The air inside the old warehouse 13's basement was surprisingly dry. The cell phone lights revealed a vast space, much larger than Olivia expected, with ancient metal shelves reaching to the ceiling. But it wasn't the shelves that caught her attention, it was the back wall. There, protected from moisture by a plastic tarp, was a huge painting. Samantha Carter's final work. "She spent weeks down here," Jennifer whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Said it was her most important piece." Daniel approached the painting, his hand trembling slightly as he touched the tarp. Just like Ella, she also left one final message. Together they removed the covering. The painting was a portrait of Ravens Cove's harbor, but like Olivia had never seen before. On the surface, it appeared to be a common night scene: the sea, the boats, the resort under construction. But there was more, much more. The numbers in the windows, Olivia realized, moving closer. Their dates. And those shadows on the pier. Records of all deliveries Daniel completed. Every movement, every transaction. Sam documented everything. A noise above made them all freeze. Footsteps. Many of them. "Is there another way out?" Olivia asked urgently. Jennifer nodded. "This way." The sound of a gun being cocked cut through the air. "Don't move." Sheriff Ryan emerged from the shadows, followed by two armed men. His badge gleamed in the dimness like an ironic reminder of everything he had betrayed. "Impressive, isn't it?" he said, approaching the painting. "Samantha had a special gift. Could see beyond appearances, capture the true nature of things and people." "How could you?" Jennifer asked, her voice shaking with anger. "He trusted you. And that was her mistake." Ryan smiled humorlessly. "Just like it was your mistake to think you could expose this. Crawford has connections you can't imagine. In Washington, in the FBI. The informant," Daniel stepped forward. "The same one who warned about Ella's investigation in Hampton Bay." Ryan raised his eyebrows. So you finally put the pieces together, Agent Mitchell?" "Yes, the same informant. The same system. Different cities, same story." Olivia noticed a subtle movement in the shadows behind Ryan. Something was happening. "And now?" she asked, keeping his attention. "You'll kill us like you killed Samantha?" "That won't be necessary." Maxwell Crawford's voice echoed through the basement as he emerged from the darkness. "Not this time." But something was wrong. Crawford didn't look like his usual confident self. There was tension in his face, fear in his eyes. "It's over, Crawford." A new voice, strong and authoritative, resonated throughout the space. Powerful lights flooded the basement through the old windows. "FBI." Everyone freeze. Chaos erupted. Ryan tried to raise his gun, but Daniel was faster, taking him down with a precise move. Crawford tried to run, only to be intercepted by agents emerging from all directions. "You planned this," Olivia said to Daniel, finally understanding. "From the beginning." He nodded. "We needed concrete evidence. The painting. The connections. And," he looked at Jennifer, who was smiling through tears, "we needed the person who had documented everything alongside Samantha. She came to me weeks before she died," Jennifer explained. "Said if anything happened to her, I should contact David Mitchell from the FBI. That he would understand the meaning of the final painting." Hours later, with the sun rising over Ravens Cove, Olivia watched the waves from the Lighthouse Cafe's porch. The harbor was full of patrol cars and agents, Crawford and Ryan in handcuffs, years of crimes finally exposed to daylight. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Daniel approached, offering a cup of coffee. "I was thinking about Samantha. And Ella." Olivia turned to face him. "They succeeded in the end. Through art, through truth." "Yes." He smiled softly, his green eyes lighter now, as if a huge weight had been lifted. "But I still have one last mission in Ravens Cove." "And what would that be?" He moved closer, gently touching her face. "Finding out if a certain detective would be interested in helping me write the next chapter." Olivia smiled, covering his hand with hers. On the horizon, the sun was turning the sea to liquid gold, and the shadows of Raven's Cove were finally beginning to dissipate. "I think we can work on that," she answered, and when their lips met, it was as if all of Samantha's paintings had come to life, full of color, mystery, and finally, hope. 1 year later. The gentle summer breeze stirred the curtains in Samantha Carter's studio, now transformed into a small art gallery. Her paintings still adorned the walls but now shared space with new works, local artists that Jennifer had discovered and encouraged as the space's new curator. Olivia stopped in front of the harbor painting, the one that had started it all. It was different seeing it now, knowing all its secrets. Like her own life, the work had multiple layers, stories hidden beneath the surface that only revealed themselves when you had the courage to look deeper. "So your favorite?" Daniel's familiar voice enveloped her like a caress. He hugged her from behind, his chin resting gently on her shoulder. Olivia laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "And now here we are planning a wedding. Life has an interesting way of surprising us," he smiled, touching her face tenderly. "Sometimes we find love in the most unlikely places. Like in a small seaside town during a murder investigation?" "Exactly." He kissed her softly. Daniel held her tighter, and together they watched the last ray of sunlight stream through the studio windows, turning everything to liquid gold. In 2 days they would marry right there under Samantha's paintings, with the Raven's Cove Sea as witness. And although their story had begun with mystery and loss, it had transformed into something much more beautiful. A story of love, truth, and redemption.